Ready whenever you are. I'd like to welcome you all to the September 1st Wilton Town Board meeting. Would you all rise for the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll take the roll call. Julie?
Supervisor Lamb.
Here.
Deputy Supervisor McCaffrey.
Here.
Councilman Bogardus.
Here.
Councilwoman Culligan. Here. Councilman O'Connor.
Here. Anybody signed up to speak?
Now, does these two go together?
The answer is yes. How are you, Rich?
Good, how are you? Good. The comment, and I'll be very brief. I personally believe that there is a fundamental flaw in a portion of the zoning ordinance. I just spoke to Ryan for a minute and asked him, should I go to the zoning board, should I go to the planning board, the town board? And his answer was, it's the town board that deals with changes or any, problems with the zoning ordinance. So I don't have time to get into details. I can tell you the section, the quick area, and then if you want to have a meeting, I'd be glad to come in and meet with whoever wants to meet. But my basic beat is this. When I moved in here 30 years ago, I built my house in a rural residential area. At that time, rural residential meant that there was room around you. It was bigger lots, bigger setbacks and so forth. Since then, since I built my house 30 years ago, there's been some change, probably a lot of changes in the zoning ordinance, but the key change that I think is basically ignores the rural residential portion is the conservation subdivision section. So, there's not time to get into it, but that's where I'd like to talk to whoever the right people would be to see if we can get that amended. So either A, if you can tell me, forget it, nobody wants that kind of stuff, move some other place, or B, no, rural residential is important. There are people in this community who want it, and we'll do something about it. Okay?
Yeah, I'll see you after.
Okay.
Alex Rosati. Did I say it right?
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate your time today. I just wanted to come again. I've been here a few times already talking about the Airbnb that's happening at 14th Street Briar in the McGregor neighborhood. Continues to happen. Looking for continued support for the board to be able to further the actions. Haven't seen anything come through since the cease and desist, and they've continued to just disregard the cease and desist openly. They're having 2 different guests a week. Sometimes it's big parties. Sometimes it's just people staying there, but it's too much of a safety concern for the neighborhood, and they're openly violating the town zoning board laws. So I hope that you'd be able to move forward with this and continue with the enforcement if this needs to go to court. Send it to court if they need to be exercised the fines that the existing law says that they have. They should be issued those fines. Just want to see progress with this because we continue to have a problem. Brought a decent amount of people today, but we can continue to bring more people if we need to be able to show that this is a problem for not just a few people in the neighborhood, but the whole neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie?
Yeah. Great, there we go. I'm Katie Rosati. I live at 12 Sweetbriar Drive with his wife. And the Airbnb property is 14 Sweetbriar Drive, right next door. And when I say we live right next door, I'm talking our driveways at the choke point are this far apart.
We drove it the last board meeting.
Yeah, so you see how close. We see each other's bedrooms. From our windows, we can see their backyard. It is extremely loud. And I'm just telling you, I'll just tell you the circumstances that we've seen since the last month that we were here. I was weeding my husband's, he's out. He came back from work late, and a bachelor approached me while I was listening to headphones, weeding the front yard. And he just let me know it's his bachelor party. He's heard from the owners that it's like, be quiet and everything. And they just wanted to introduce themselves to me so I wouldn't call the cops. And that it's going to be 13 guys, which exceeds their limit on Airbnb. Meanwhile, Airbnb is not allowed. And so I let him know this, and they were quiet after I told them, this isn't allowed in this neighborhood. You cannot do this. And the cars exceeded their limit as well. 4 days later, a bachelorette party's there. There's stalls in the pool. There's children in our neighborhood where there's a lot of visibility in their pool too. I mean, luckily we don't have children, but there are a lot of children that can see this from their property, from our property too. So I'm here, I'm telling you these concerns. This is just a couple of instances. There are, it's like everybody's biggest party of the year is every single weekend, and we have to be there and see it. And even if it's just during the summertime or just during the weekend, these people are making a big profit at our expense, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop now. And that's all I'm saying. I'm over it. I'm done. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I've driven by there this past weekend, Traverse weekend. I drove through that area 4 times. I stopped at some neighbor's house. I know neighbors and stuff in the area, and there was multiple cars.
Yeah, we know there's absolutely 100% there's an issue and there's a problem. We're working on the solution.
I appreciate that. I noticed because of this, I feel like more people are starting to Airbnb because of it, because they're like, oh, they're making this much money well, if I just do it during the week, I can make this much money too. Yeah. And we've noticed a lot more Airbnbs pop up as a result of this.
Yeah. We are trying, obviously, we don't want to infringe upon property owners' rights, so it's a very delicate journey that we're doing, but we are progressing.
It's a violation of our zoning laws.
That's all.
Town board is on your...
accusatory statement. It's already been done. We are sending them to court on the 20th, I think it's the 24th of October.
And it'll be up to a judge. And hopefully the judge sees it the way everybody out there sees it.
Yeah. Wilton Town Court, I guess. Can anybody go to that?
We'll be there. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Tim O'Connor.
I just wanted to let people know that it's not just Katie and Alex. I'm at 59 Hardstone Drive, so I'm directly behind the Airbnb house. My backyard butts up against theirs. So in some regards, we may have the worst of it, my wife and daughter and I. To echo what's been said, every week, every weekend, different people. There's been times where it's been completely inappropriate. I have a 14-year-old daughter, maybe a little used to it. We have younger kids next to us. There's been parties, 15 to 20 frat party type of atmosphere. Language is terrible. I said to Paul, I've actually come to sort of rethink how I want to use my own backyard as a result of that, because I've hesitated to have elderly parents. I've hesitated to have them up because it's uncomfortable being back there with cursing and F-bombs being dropped by 20-somethings that I don't know. There's a different group every time. And it's a great neighborhood, family neighborhood. We've been there 10 years. I've been 3 different owners there. And we've gotten along good. It's got this great community feel to it. And suddenly it's all been sort of turned upside down. And
Sorry.
It's changed the way some of us have sort of come to think of the ability to enjoy the home that we have. And I thought about that last night. We moved in, we bought a home. These people bought a house. We've met them once, the owner, took tour to try to win us over. So clearly they knew they were doing something they should. They offered us gifts and attempted to buy my support. And when they didn't get that, more of a, well, you should just use it, this is the way the world's going. And what really struck me is, in the conversation I had with these people, when they would come over to our house, and the homes across from me are on the golf course, and they looked over and they said, oh, there's not as many woods behind those houses. And I said, that's the golf course. And they said, huh. So they bought a house in what's known as a golf course community. They didn't even know what they were buying or where they were, what it meant. And that sort of just said it all to me. We got a great neighborhood, a great respect for each other. We sort of protect the integrity of this community. And they don't even know what they bought, what they've invested in. We've invested in the feel of the community. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen, doing all the things you said, and we're looking forward to that.
Peace and quiet, peace and quiet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Teresa O'Connor.
I think I'm going to pass. I didn't know what I was signing up for. He was the Speaker of the House.
You echo what he said.
We have the Speaker of the House was here?
Cynthia Park.
See, I didn't know what I was signing up for either. I'm going to move the mic down, but I live on 30 Harvest, so 14th, I live directly across from Alex and Katie, and I live kitty corner from the house in question, the Airbnb question, and I have an 11-and-a-half-year-old daughter. In our backyard, when we're swimming in our pool, I can look directly into their pool house. That means they can look directly into my pool. And my friend, my daughter, she invites her friends, they're swimming in the pool, and they love to just run around. I have a big front yard, a big side yard, and the side yard is completely visible, and the front yard from this house. I now tell the girls to go around the other way. I don't know who's there. There was one instance, when the owners first came and they introduced themselves, all the immediate neighbors, they did introduce themselves to me. I guess I wasn't, across the street, they didn't consider me a neighbor. So I didn't have the contact information, I didn't have anything. There was one day I couldn't get back when I drove a big SUV, I couldn't get my car down Sweetbriar because they had 13 cars parked on both sides. So I had to find this house in Airbnb and message the owner that way, as if I was interested in Airbnb the house, and say, listen, you need to tell your guests they can't block the road, either park on one side or have them in the driveway. To which they replied right there, and they said, okay, we'll do that, and, took them whatever, and all the cars went in and counted. There were 13 cars. And I just had story after story. My husband's a dentist. We had an office party at our pool. We do one every summer for the office. One of the hygienists came in do we need to call 911? There are guys just laying on the grass across the street. That was the house in question, and I'm like, I don't even know what they're doing. I don't know why they're on the grass. They might be drunk. I don't want to go over. And it becomes a security question. And finally, when I did contact the Airbnb owners, I know they were looking for me because they had invited me to a barbecue. I said I was going to be in the city that weekend. As soon as I came home, I was unloading my car. They rang my doorbell right away. Hi, I'm here to introduce myself. I want to talk to you about what's going on. And they brought their son over. And I was like, listen, I just got back. I can't talk right now, but I just wanted to talk to you. I just can't do this right now. He left. He sent over one of the other owners who was pregnant at the time. She was 8 months pregnant. I couldn't have her stand outside in the heat, so I invited her in. And she was talking about, oh, it's such a great neighborhood. And obviously she's trying to bond with me. And I said, listen, my house was a mess. I had luggage. I had groceries. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I can't do this right now. Later, my phone rings. He called me while he was driving back to his home in Jersey. He kept me on the phone for 40 minutes, please. I just want to talk about this because, I'm just concerned that, you're just not happy with what's going on. I told him I am not happy with what's going on. I can't use my front yard in peace. I can't use my pool in peace. When we're in our pool, we can hear everything that's going on out there. And he tells me that, you should innately, there's his quote, innately trust your neighbors. I'm like, well, you're not not my neighbor. I don't know who's there. Like, you know, he tells me I check everybody's government ID. I'm like, that means nothing to me. You know, like that means, you're not doing a background check. I don't know who's in there. You have a guest limit that is frequently ignored. You have a car limit that's frequently ignored. And I'm not comfortable with my daughter parading around in her swimsuit with her friends, and I don't know who's there. I don't know who's there. I don't feel safe about it. And, you know, he says, we have cameras, and we have this, and we have that. I'm like, I have cameras, and I have this too. But I shouldn't have to rely on that to feel secure. Like, I don't know who's in that house. I don't. You don't know who's in that house. And that's just the bottom line. Like, I don't feel safe having my 11-and-a-half-year-old just by herself, like riding her bike, you know, just in the front yard. She likes to just be with the dog, blanket, and read. And I can't have her do that right now. I'm like, you know, go to the side yard, go in the backyard, go by the pool, but you can't be out in the front anymore by yourself. So, that's really all I have to say.
Yeah, no.
You know, it is a concern.
Yeah.
You know, we want to enjoy the summer. We want to enjoy our yard. We want to enjoy our pools. And it's the music, the language, the amount of cars. You know, it's just a concern. It's a quality of life issue too at this point.
Your story and the story of, you know, your neighbors is being told not just in your neighborhood, but in other neighborhoods around our town and lots of other towns, you know, where this stuff has just gotten way out of hand. And, you know, as you said, you're being deprived of the peaceful use of your own backyard, you know, especially during the summer, you know, during the fair winter months. And, you know, it's time we put the hammer down on some of these folks.
And more than anything, I think more for myself at least, is the safety. Because I know if there's a bunch of men in that house, I'm more vigilant.
Sure.
I don't know who's in there. I don't. And she doesn't have any siblings to like look out for each other. So, you know, she's 11.5 years old. I have to give her some freedom. I can't keep her locked up forever. But then at the back of my mind, I'm from New York City. I know what can happen. You know? So it's just a concern for me as a mom, as a resident, as a neighbor. We're always looking out for each other in the neighborhood, which I love that atmosphere. So I would like to keep that atmosphere. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, what's the court date?
20th.
October 24th.
Oh, 24th.
Michael Farah?
I might get a speeding ticket for that day.
Would be the only way you get in.
I know.
Good evening. My name is Michael Farah. I live at 2 Autumn Court. I'm approximately 2 blocks away from this house in question. So it may not seem like, you know, not big of a deal, but my family, my young family, is definitely dealing with some issues that are occurring due to that house. And in the meantime, kind of looking around the neighborhood, I've been noticing some odd activity, and an Airbnb's popping up across the street, another one popping up. There's 2 on Fieldstone, there's another one on Autumn Court. It's getting a little bit frustrating because we bought into this neighborhood and we searched a lot of different areas, my wife and I, to find a good, safe, secure area, somewhere to raise our family. We have a 4-year-old daughter who is just a little spitfire running around the lawn, and she loves to play in the front yard. We have a huge front yard. One of the biggest concerns that I have is people speeding through the neighborhood. I mean, we'll have that in any neighborhood, but there's people in particular. I'll give you one example. We're walking with our daughter in a wagon, deliver a 4-way stop. Truck blows through quite fast, doesn't stop. And I go, he had his windows down. I said, hey, what's going on? Stop sign. Proceeds to flip me off. Passengers flip me off. Get the F-bombs thrown at me. I see Jersey plates. My wife's like, relax, relax, let it go, let it go. We continue with our walk. I watch the car go up, turn down on Harvest. The next morning, took my dogs for a walk, decided to go down Harvest. There's that same truck with those Jersey plates at that house. So I think we have issues like that. I mean, that's a concern. I mean, people they don't live there. They don't care. It's not their neighborhood. They're not going to treat it like their own. It's very, very frustrating. So I've noticed that. I'm very concerned about not knowing who, you don't know who your neighbor is, but you get to know them as best as possible. With this business model that these people have come up with, what's frustrating is that it just constantly have this turnover. I don't know if there's a convicted child molester that's going to be down there. I've got a 4-year-old playing on the swing set. You don't know. And, you know, I know life's full of uncertainties, but I believe in talking to Paula and talking to some of my neighbors. You know, I appreciate everything you can do and anything you can do to shut this down before it gets even more out of hand. Because right now, you know, we know of that house, and I know there's 3 more, possibly a 4th going up very shortly. And people just see this as a money-making opportunity. One particular individual told me, and I had a discussion, I called him out on it. I said, why are you doing this? Why would you do that? Why would you, this beautiful home you have, how do you know who's going to come in? Well, we're going to vet them out, and if they're going to pay, the quote was, if they're going to pay the crazy price we're asking, that's awesome, and we're going to go away on vacation to Hawaii. And I'm like, so it's a money thing. If you can't afford to go on vacation, then, you know, your house owns you, you don't own the house, and it's very frustrating. So thank you for everything and anything you can do to kind of shut this down and keep our neighborhood safe. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello again.
Hey, Paul.
Hello,
Paul.
On Cobble Hill. Everybody's heard the experiences here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the law. I was familiar that the accusatory instrument was being prepared. I don't know if it's been served or sent.
Paul, just to let you know, talk to the attorney, you can't send it, it has to be served because of the way the law's written.
Perfect, that's fine, because I wanted to make sure that you had everything that the town, I should say, that the town had everything that they needed. I dropped off some other pictures the other day with dates, affidavits, we have additional videos, there's all kinds of evidence that will be needed at court that will be available upon request, or I'll just furnish it if you want. So we've got all of that stuff, and I feel very firm that's a solid case. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the issue of the fines. Last month we talked about the fines and increasing. I've got another 2 files full of case law, and I could fill 4 more about fines. One of the important issues here is that each day's violation shall constitute a separate violation, and the courts have long sustained pyramiding of penalties as a valid means of control. Now, when you go to court and you've got the accusatory information, that or the instrument, it's important to put all of those continuous days in there, which is why all those photographs I dropped off have dates on them. Each day is a separate violation. It's not you go to court and you have one shot and then you do it again. It's kind of like you get a speeding ticket one day and you get a speeding ticket the second day and the third day, and then you go to court 6 months later, or 30 days later. The judge is going to say, well, that third violation happened, you're subject to losing your license. It's the same thing with this here. Every day is a continuing violation, and it adds up real quick, as you can see in my letter. So, and I was even courteous on putting that in with just 1 day. Courts, and I'll be glad to submit the case law all over here. New York since the 70s. This one's got a fine of $2,500. This one's got another one of $50,000. And courts will uphold these fines. And they're very clear in this. Each week gives rise to civil liability that a defendant for each week the structure has violated the zoning regulations. So I'll put that together in a trial package for the town as well with a huge binder. We've got another binder on that, but I want to make sure that everybody's got everything that they need. Not only is it important for this particular case, but because we've heard about all of these things going on, when this precedent is set, then the law also requires or also allows for anybody assisting in the violation, which would be short-term rental companies like Airbnb, to also be tagged. And then the solution to that is to serve them, and they're going to be on notice, and then they can geofence and tag it out and just say this property in this zone is not allowed for short-term rental. And that's how you end it. So.
And that's why we want to make sure it's done perfect. The I's are dotted, the T's are crossed.
Right here, I've got all kinds of stuff going on, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Paul,
Thanks, Paul.
Paul, thank you for doing that.
Sure, got it.
You know, I feel bad for all you people come month after month here. It is aggravating, and this town board, as previous boards, have pride in the quality of life in this town. We're going to keep it that way. I addressed this with Mark. We want something done. He has taken action. Something will be done.
You know, something else that this discussion has provoked, and I'll be talking about it later in the town board meeting, is, and Paul, you had, made the point early on when we started these discussions about how the use of boarding houses and tourist homes is not allowed in the R1 zone. I don't think it should be allowed in the R2 zone or the R3 zone. Some of those neighborhoods, I happen to live in one, there's others around town, are as densely populated in terms of houses and their, proximity to their neighbors as R1. So I'm going to be proposing at this meeting, they will have a public hearing next month to have that restriction on boarding houses and tourist homes, et cetera, applied to the R2 and R3 residential neighborhoods in town as well.
And if that falls up short in the interim, I'll just say that you have to just look at some of the bulk tables and the setback requirements. So for example, on one of the a tourist home, even if it's allowed by special permit, or if it's an R2 or R3, they have to comply with 30-foot setbacks from the property. They have to have a parking lot for 8 cars with a tree in it. There's all kinds of different things that can go on that right now you can say, even though you're in this zone, you're not complying with it. This is not acceptable. So there's all kinds of different tools available in addition to amending the code itself.
Sure. Thank you.
I'd like to change the October town board meeting date to October 5th. Need a motion.
I'll make a motion to change the date to the 5th.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
That's the Wednesday before.
And Maria, this is, so we have
Because of budget.
to meet the requirement of having a budget adopted by?
Not a budget adopted, but yes, you're absolutely right to have a budget presented to the town board by October 5th. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, it's on or before October 5th. Our board meeting would have been October 6th, so, the law doesn't say a lot about, and Mark, you can, consequences for not doing it by October 5th, but I'd rather err on the side of following the rules. Thank you.
All set? Did everybody get a chance to read August minutes, and somebody want to make a motion to approve them?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Code amendment for digital signs. You want to speak on that, Mark?
Actually, it's great.
All right.
This is great, baby.
You got it right.
Although Mark and I have had a couple of conversations about it.
The only thing I suggested is, and it doesn't matter which way the board goes, it's, first off, a digital sign. I don't see the benefit, I myself don't see the benefit of a digital sign that we turn off at dusk. It's a lit sign. That's what they're looking for. But you got to think about the residents of the street. Dorothy Nolan's the kickoff for this. And the residents, there's long-term residents across the street from that school. Residents that have been there some 30, 40 years. How's it going to affect that? So one of the things we have to look at when we do stuff like this is, should we do it by special permit? Should we have the zoning board look at criteria exactly, to fit it into those other zones? And we did the 2 fire departments based on a public safety issue, and it helps them get the word out in emergency times of emergency. They do the burn bans, remind people to get their chimneys clean, that kind of stuff. In this case, I don't know. I don't know what the benefit is. It hasn't been in front of the board yet.
Yeah, I've talked, so what we're talking about is similar to the sign that we have right out in front of Town Hall here, is the members of the Home School Association at Dorothy Nolan They have a backlit sign already in front of the school, which would not comply with the ordinance if it were made a digital media sign. And in addition to messaging related to the students themselves and their parents that, you would think would be aware of the goings-on in the school, there's also public messaging, because all the residents of the town are taxpayers in the school district. There are events and issues that not only impact the students themselves or their parents, but other people in town. So I was asked, if I would look into it. So in looking at the ordinance, and I had a conversation, with Mark, Dorothy Nolan happens to be in a residential zone, and these types of illuminated signs are only allowed in the C1 zone. And the change that I'm suggesting is that outside of the C1 zone, that there be an exception that would allow for such a sign at emergency services facilities and public schools. So in addition to the firehouses, the emergency squad, there's really only one building that this applies to, and that's the Dorothy Nolan School. The code says the sign would have to be 40 feet from the road. 30 feet, I'm sorry. Yeah, 30 feet from the property line. So that sets it back quite a ways, and there's the current sign area wouldn't work because it's, just about next to the road. But there's a lawn area that is set back, that's in between the parking and driving areas, where something like that might work. Let's see, it would be subject to a special use permit. So it's not a permitted, allowed use. So it would be subject to the zoning board, looking at prospective size, location. Because there are residences across the road, conditions can be put on that, at maybe not necessarily at dusk, but, at sunset or, 7 p.m., 8 p.m., so it's not lit all night. That would possibly bother neighbors. And Mark and I were also talking about having some of the criteria about the level of illumination, so that it wouldn't be, a nuisance to any of the folks that live across the street.
Would them 4 houses be notified of the change prior to?
If it's a special permitted use.
Yeah.
The Dorothy Nolan, or the school district, would have to notify the neighboring property.
Yeah, I would get their feel, and, like everybody else that was here tonight. If it affects their way of living, then we certainly don't want to add to it.
So where would the sign go? Between the
Sounds like it's going to be right up by the school.
Not sure.
Well, no one has designated a specific location for it because, up until now, it's just not allowed.
Yeah.
So
I understand why they would want it. I can never read the sign at Maple Ave going by because it doesn't. No, because it doesn't change fast enough. Or I can't, like, as it's scrolling through, I can't read it.
I know our firehouse, the sign at the firehouse, the sign can only change, it has to be certain intervals so it doesn't change and distract. I'm not a big fan of the sign at Dorothy Nolan, to be very honest with you. I don't think these signs belong in residential areas. I'm not a big fan of them down the commercial areas as well. They're very distracting, day or night. If it goes off at 8 o'clock at night, but the other day when it was storms coming in, it was dark at 5 o'clock, those signs are very distracting. And if they're flashing, especially at the level that the sign currently is at the school, it's going to be distracting. That's a narrow road down through there. And the last thing you need is more distractions. And I'm not in favor of a sign at Dorothy Nolan.
There's a lot of traffic on that road.
Well, if it goes off at dusk too.
But, when you get
dark winter.
Right, you get dark winter days.
Then is the message actually getting across?
To be honest with you, I find that
people at the peak time.
If it's that far away from the road, what's it gonna do anyways? Other than make your head turn.
I find that sign that's currently there
If you want it, I
probably
mean-
better than an LED sign, because it doesn't flash, it doesn't change, your messages are there, and,
You'll see it coming and going.
yeah, and my kids went to school there, I always check when parent-teacher conferences as when I was driving, or, but LED signs draw your attention away. It's a distracting thing, as opposed to a fixed stationary worded sign. I'm not a big fan of the LED signs, period. I mean, you go down Route 9, down past your shop and everything, and everything's
That mean I can't get an LED sign?
I don't care what you apply for.
This is not going well for you, John.
But that's a commercial area, so you might fall under different rules.
I'd wait a few months.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest with you. And it's nothing personal against Dorothy Nolan.
sure.
I have a great working relationship with Dorothy Nolan, just,
But I run a body shop, so the distraction might.
there you go.
I'm all set.
Sponsored by the Body Shop.
So we're going to defer that one.
Okay.
Now, one other item, as long as we're on code amendments, and I mentioned it during the public comment period when these folks were here, is in the list of allowed uses by special permit in the R2 and R3 zones are the same types of uses: boarding houses, tourist homes, bed and breakfast facilities. And, from existing neighborhoods around town to some proposed neighborhoods, even up in the R3 zone. Is that where the PUDD is?
Yes.
Which, again, it's going to be a relatively dense development. You could have the same issues there. So I'd like the board to consider omitting boarding houses, tourist homes, and bed and breakfast facilities as they are in the R1 zone from the R2 and R3 zone as well.
Would that cover all rental type things?
See, I think that would be, because I know of a lot that,
Cover all rental.
Right.
I know of a lot of them that do it, and they do it the right way.
Correct.
And it doesn't affect anything,
Yes.
and I think if we change that, that may affect a lot of things.
Ooh, absolutely.
But the way he mentioned it earlier, if it requires that much setback and that many parking spaces and a tree in the middle of a parking lot, that should be enough for us to be able to go in there and stop it from happening before it happens. The same way once we set a precedent with this Briar, but changing that could change, and I know a couple of them on Smithbridge Road.
Yeah.
And you're saying that would...
No, I'm not saying that. And Mark, or even Paul Kelly, if you can correct me on this, when you get into the defining boarding houses, tourist homes, and bed and breakfast facilities, it's not the principal homeowner who just rents out his house, once in a while, for an Airbnb type thing. This is more the business, where the investor, like we have, on Sweetbriar, where you have investors, or even, corporations, Marriott, Hilton, they're all buying up residential properties to do this. So it doesn't have an impact on the people who, I'm going to go away for the weekend.
Can we limit it to like PUDDs, Planned Unit Development Districts? I mean, like, when you're talking...
Get a permit for it to operate, you're thinking...
Right, I could see them not being in a development.
Right now, in those two zones you mentioned, it's by special permission. There's specific criteria
Yes.
to do that. So it requires them to come in front of the zoning board to ask, and if they don't meet that criteria, the zoning board can't grant it.
That's if they
But I'm not
honest.
He's talking about the ones that aren't asking for permission, right?
No, I'm not going to presume that the ZBA, won't give that permission to somebody. So the Marriott Corporation comes in and they say, hey, we just bought a house on Sweetbriar Drive and it meets all the criteria. Here's your permit. And now you have...
But they have to show that they meet the criteria.
Even if they...
As far as a special permit.
Right, but even if they meet the criteria, do you want in the R1 zone or R2 zone or R3
The
zone?
R1 zone's not allowed at all.
And what I'm saying is I don't want to allow it in the R2 or R3 under those kinds of circumstances where it is a full-time business operation.
I don't
regulate that. That's more, that's like a real estate
The regulations.
issue.
That's what we're doing.
But that's what we're going through right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
you know, with the
So I think
complaint on
that the
Sweetbriar.
town should look at addressing short-term rentals as a broad spectrum, because here's what I see happening, and I might be wrong, and Mark can correct me. We say, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this. Just, it makes it a little harder, but people will do it, and now they're doing it against the law.
They're not going to tell you.
More punishing residents, good residents, bad residents for renting their property.
So if you cannot, so the only difference between R1 and R2 and R3 is that you can put boarding house.
Difference.
As far as, I'm not saying, I don't want to get into the minutia of the criteria. In the R1 zone, you cannot have a boarding house, a tourist home, or a bed and breakfast. I don't want to allow them in the R2 or the R3 zone either.
But you're saying that the R2 and R3 zones are exactly the same as the R1, and I'm saying they're not.
They're not.
They're much larger parcels.
Oh, no, they're not. They're not.
Your particular one is not.
Exactly, and so are lots of other neighborhoods. When Richard, made his comment before,
In a house in that
in any conservation
development
subdivision,
would not meet that.
in any conservation subdivision, you'll have lots that are as small as 100 feet wide. So
But they
it's,
wouldn't meet the criteria for that either.
then what's the harm in outlawing them if they don't meet the criteria anyway?
Because
You're
some of
outlawing them against the ones that
For
do.
everybody. You're just, because of the nature, you're talking about neighborhoods, like a conservation subdivision. And I'm saying that there's a lot of properties in the town that are much bigger, and there's a couple, 2 or 3, that are doing this properly, that have special use permits, that have never had a problem, and they're in the R2 and R3 zones. I don't know that it's.
And that criteria, we can look at that during this code. Right, and make that wider or longer based on what's going on with this last fiasco on this Sweetbriar. If it's 30 feet, we make it 45 feet. Make the parking lots bigger. But you can't, if you go banning it on 2 more areas where it's been allowed for the last.
I'm not talking about the temporary rental. I'm talking about.
I like the track season.
I'm not even talking about just the track season, because if a primary homeowner rents their house out, for 6 weeks, but, the other 46 weeks, they're living in it as their primary residence, this doesn't apply to them.
Right, I understand what you're saying.
So strictly boarding, tourist.
This is somebody operating a boarding house,
Not
tourist
living there,
home,
period.
or B&B.
Not living there,
business.
period.
That is
Right,
correct.
it's an investment property.
So that, we can look into that on the zoning changes and make sure we can, because that's coming up. I got to set that, I got a whole list of people that are going to be on it to review it, and that's going to be their top priority is this whole bed and breakfast and now tourist and Airbnb.
Building.
Get a meeting as soon as possible, please.
It's going to be done. My hands are full, but
I know they are.
I'll empty some of the dirt out.
We all set on this one? Use amendment addition C3 district personal service. We got a letter here from the owner of the old Storts on 20 Gordon Lane. She's got a girl wants to go in there and open a beauty shop. It's not allowed. And I talked to Mark. He says, there should be a lot of more things allowed there.
Yeah, I'm surprised it wasn't. I went through that whole list. I'm like, why is that not in there?
The only thing that's not in there
I know it.
doesn't make sense.
So we need a motion, set up a public hearing, and
I'll make the motion to set a public hearing.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I need a beauty shop.
Do they want a digital sign? That's all I want to know.
No.
So I'm gonna make a motion to reappoint Jane Paolo to the independent board review from
I'll make that motion.
10/1/2022 to 9/30/2027.
I'll make the motion to reappoint Jane.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. EDP presenting TDR for Forest Grove.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. My name is Joe Hannibal. I'm with the Environmental Design Partnership here on behalf of Forest Grove LLC. With me tonight is Peter Belmonte, Forest Grove LLC. What we are proposing is a transfer of development rights from one parcel in the R2 zone to another parcel, Forest Grove subdivision, which is also in the R2 zone in Wilton. So the town board recently passed legislation that allows for the transfer of development rights, exactly what we are proposing. I think this is the first application the town is going to see on this, and I'm going to show some of the benefits that result from this. Here we look at the red highlighting this map. It's the overall map of the town of Wilton. The red is the 600 or so acres of Forest Grove property. Yellow land is additional land that has been recently purchased that we will be going to the planning board to expand the conservation subdivision associated with that property. This golden color is a roughly 90-acre parcel of land on Ruggles Road that we will show can support somewhere in the range of about 30 units on that property. Again, the overview map, this map is now turned north up. Forest Grove on the left side of the map, the yellow property outlined on the right side of the map is the 90 acres known as the picket parcel that we are looking to transfer the 30 lots that could exist there into the Forest Grove subdivision. Now, what is somewhat unique about this property, which we'd really like the town to consider, and Brian will correct me when I get these wrong, but the land surrounded by, or surrounding this picket parcel, the blue areas, the red areas that just popped up, are existing open space properties that are preserved by either the town of Wilton, New York State DEC, or the Wilton Wildlife Preserve. As you look, that yellow parcel is central to all of them. The picket parcel is surrounded by them. What we're looking to do is not develop this parcel, but deed these 90 acres to the town, take those 30 lots, put them over into the Forest Grove subdivision, and that would help the town preserve larger and larger tracts of protected open space within the rural communities and rural portions of the town.
Does that mean you're gonna make that roundabout bigger?
We're gonna build 2 more.
Maybe we should just give them this one for the roundabout.
Conceptually, and this ultimately, we have to go through the planning board. We're going to go through an extensive review with the planning board, who we would hope would be lead agency for the project. Ryan's going to have quite a bit of input on this, and there will be a third-party engineer brought in to review all of the materials that we are presenting related to slopes, wetlands, environmental constraints on the property. Here's the currently approved 321 lots on the Forest Grove community. We will have to go back to the planning board as part of this process to amend the subdivision to include not only what we were hoping that the town board sees as a great benefit, the 30 lots from the picket parcel, but again, if you look now down on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, that's some of the additional land that we had bought, another 100 acres. We're going to redistribute the density from that lot as part of a regular conservation subdivision and add the 30 lots from Picket into the property, revising, amending, updating the master plan for the Forest Grove community. We think, again, I think it's a great benefit to the town to have preserve these large tracts of open space and keep some of the more rural sections of the town rural with less dense, bringing the development and increased density into areas that have public sewers, public water, have the infrastructure and the road networks already in place to support them. So tonight, I believe we're asking the board to defer lead agency to the planning board and also refer this application to the planning board for recommendations.
Where's Jones Road on there? Is that the left-hand side road there?
Here is the roundabout.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Jones Road. This is
So
Jones Road here.
the new proposed area is kind of up where the sand pit and everything is?
Yeah, so we recently purchased another 100 acres of land right down here. We would be revising various portions of the community, changing the unit mix, the unit counts, working with the markets to provide the most appropriate homes for the community itself.
But that's kind of where the sand pit and everything is?
No, it's north of the sand pit.
It's north of the sand pit?
Bullard Lane.
Yeah, this is
Okay,
the
it's
sand
close
pit
to
here.
Bullard, okay.
This is Bullard Lane.
Okay, all right, so the other
Showing
side.
that drawing sideways, it doesn't make it any easier to read it.
Yeah. That's why I always get lost in the road maps.
Just so I'm clear, does this illustration include the 31 additional lots that you would get under the conservation subdivision?
This includes the 31 lots from the Pickett property as well as the, I forget the number right now, I think it's an additional 60 lots from
The additional
100 acre parcel
Okay.
there. So there's roughly an additional 80 to 90 lots
They're all
shown in this layout right now.
Okay.
What's the total number of housing would that bring it up to?
It would be somewhere right in the 400 right now.
Yeah, okay.
In that whole entire subdivision.
Correct.
How much more property you buying?
Any town of Wilton land to anybody else?
Well, we keep on finding these good parts that work.
Is there any more around this thing?
There's one.
I bet you that's on the market soon.
No, we were told no.
You know,
Good.
The 100 acre remote area is one of the benefits. This property itself, which again, it's certainly, there's homes starting to be constructed there. There's brand new infrastructure put into the highway system to have in place. But we're also dedicating several hundred acres, 300 to 400 acres of land to the town in developing a very extensive trail network, which I had the pleasure of
When was that supposed to take place?
for 3 hours.
That's already in the deal.
When was that supposed to take place anyways?
What's that?
No, transfer of the land.
The dedication.
The large portion will be the first dedication, right?
Yes.
Right, we gotta get the path built first.
This is, again, north to the right.
Right.
This dark line here, all the way to Scout Road, which is about here.
Right.
I think we're dedicating in the next 6 months to a year as part of Phase 1, certainly before we go into Phase 1B, about 200 acres of land to the town, as well as we are developing the trail system, at least clearing the trails and making them accessible to the people, to the town Wilton residents. They won't be paved, they will just be accessible trails until we progress the project.
We know the town's about as interested as the whole goal of having us build things on their property. So we want to get all the paths clear before our dedication is made.
Oh, is that it?
But that's set,
That's your story?
that's set in stone and that can't be changed, right?
We don't want prevailing wages, we don't want to be subject to any
That's set in
other
stone.
That was part of the whole planning process.
to building on the town's property, so.
I'm with you.
Man,
But we're
that your house is getting littler
One
and
thing
littler,
is
isn't it, John?
The paths, once they're cleared, are open for use.
Right.
So even if it's be under our ownership, they'll still be open for
So
use.
John can still hunt on it? No.
So I see-
I don't recommend anybody going out there with a white puffy hat on during hunting season. Yeah.
I see you broke ground on that.
To be honest, I think it's a fantastic
The
idea.
second home just got done.
I actually like the fact that.
Somebody want to make a,
Oh, Doug, okay. I drive by there, I drive in there periodically.
Framing the first home, the second home's been done.
Okay, yeah, you were digging the last time I was back in there.
I personally think it's a great
Doing the
idea.
irrigation work right
I don't know
now
anything about that
today.
property on Ruggles Road,
And they're starting the landscaping next week.
as long as it's not underwater.
So I know it's a difficult to get back there with.
How is the Ruggles
fire
Road
emer-
property?
We had a couple fire emergencies back in Putnam Lane.
Like, is it
On Putnam Lane.
wetlands and
Wetland
wetlands?
areas, DEC wetlands.
3 weeks ago? You were just digging.
Looked at the property as what we could do under the cluster regulation. And our computations based on what we've done on all the other clusters and conservation we've done in Wilton yields us right about 30 to 31 miles.
Even with the wetlands that are on it?
And I assume all of these numbers are correct, that the minimum lot width setbacks and everything else are
That's what
consistent
we're
with the
going to
code?
look into, dig deep into, and that's
Okay.
why we're hiring the town. So the town board will, as Joe was saying, request the Wilton Planning Board, if you so choose, request the Wilton Planning Board to be the lead agency.
I think that makes sense.
So that'd be
They
one
have the
action.
most
The other thing we're
knowledge.
going to do is set up an escrow account. The applicant will provide funds to the town. In this escrow account, the town will be hiring a third-party reviewer to look at the wetlands. They'll send out a wetland biologist to look at this piece of property, the Pickett's property, and agree with what EDP has done or not, and state, yes, this is what they're coming up with, it meets all the requirements if it was a subdivision. So that's what we're going to spend the next couple of months looking at.
And I think it's a fantastic idea. Makes sense to the town.
Somebody want to make a motion to request the Wilton Planning Board take the lead agency and
I'll make that motion.
recommend to the town board? You got a second?
Second Aaron's motion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Sugar Prime Property.
Give your checkbook a rest.
Well figured out.
Thank you.
I'd like to see a motion,
I'm glad that new ordinance we passed didn't get too much dust on it before it was tried.
There was something that was talked about
For a minute,
a couple of years ago.
yeah, I remember hearing that. 30 odd, all those houses that we just.
We got a planning board one too, chief?
need a motion to appoint Chad Germain to the planning board from 9/1/22 to 12/31/22. I know him well. I think Ray knows him. He'd be a big asset to the planning board in the town.
I'll make a motion to appoint Mr. Jerome to the planning board.
I'll second.
Second? Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Gary. Wilton Square Market 31. Would you read that stuff, Julie, about the tax?
Really, no, it's this last one. This is where I talk this stuff. You guys talk about it at the meeting, so it's just an acceptance.
How much money are they getting back?
I don't have that, Julie. It should be on the very back.
Yeah, it was like quite a bit.
Very back.
Back of one.
2.3.
Very end of your stuff.
How much money are they getting back?
It didn't say that. It didn't say the refund. It said that.
Hang on there, it says,
What are you looking for?
I
want
read
their
it.
assessments lowered, and
The last number I read was like 2.3 million.
That's the reduction in assessment.
right, that's what that is.
Our assessor's not here to speak on it?
Where in the hell did I read it?
This was in the executive session last
Oh, okay.
last month.
There was Market 32? I thought
Market 32 and
I thought we spoke on the mall last time. at
No.
Market 32.
there were two.
Wilton Square, I thought it was.
There were two
Two
separate.
issues.
The mall's not here.
I don't remember the mall. I remember the mall.
That wasn't the mall.
Somebody want to make a motion to accept it?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Committee reports. Bulk waste pickup is Saturday, right?
The 10th.
Oh, 10th, okay, I'm sorry.
Week from Saturday.
If you aren't doing anything, show up. The new exemptions for the veterans, I don't know nothing about that. Do you?
They've just given me some extra, for combat zone veterans. They added some more,
Criteria?
You guys get anything for being married, or that don't come?
no. Are you involved in combat?
More perilous.
Anybody else got anything on committee reports?
The new town pumps are in and they're functioning properly at this time. Yep.
They're all working?
Did we find
Yep, they're all-
anybody's pumps?
Yep, the new fuel pumps are working. I know they're looking to upgrade the fuel tank in his budget for next year. But the pumps are working and I haven't heard any complaints.
Good.
Did we find any help for Gavin Park or maintenance?
Scott's still trying to find a
He wants to work.
I get like bombarded with a bunch of, I don't know, pictures. Just one picture after another, after another, after another. Huh?
And tomorrow.
Oh, never mind.
Maria, you want to give your controller's report?
Category 1 is our budget transfers. We have 2 items. The first one relates to one that we talked about last month, but we have more information, more detailed information regarding the purpose for the amendment, or the transfer, I should say. It's $4,000 for 3 vehicles. So I just wanted to make that clarification again. I know it was already mentioned to you, but we're ratifying it now. I think everybody had agreed to it by email, but I just want to ratify that. And then the second one is that we have, as we'll see in the personnel section later, resignation of our current dog control officer and the hire of a new one at a higher rate. I calculated a month's worth of time that there will be overlap, plus the increase in cost for the rest of the year for the higher rate, and that is the resulting $1,761.20 for the new DCO. So those are the first 2 budget transfers.
Right. Come in, I'll make a
motion
on budget transfers.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Thank you. The second category is our budget amendments. The first item relates to summer camp fees, which exceeded what we budgeted because there were more enrollments than expected. Conversely, we had to hire more summer camp staff to handle those enrollees. So I'm just moving money from, to increase the revenue budgeted to match the actual, and then also do the same thing on the expenditure side. The second item under the second category is the ARPA money for another not-for-profit that applied to and qualified for our not-for-profit fund. That is Birthright of Saratoga County, which services people all throughout the county, including Wilton. The third item and the fourth item is coming from increase in the consolidated highway aid, which is the CHIPS, known as CHIPS. We're increasing revenue that we anticipate getting from the state for the CHIPS programs, and then recognizing proposed expenditures for another piece of equipment, which is it's an actual attachment for a piece of equipment. It's called a wedger, and the way it was explained to me was, made a lot of sense, which is that the purchase of this piece of equipment will enable us to not have to fog seal the roads, which I just took a quick look at what we paid last year for fog sealing. It was over $20,000. So this piece of equipment could theoretically, if it works, will save us money in the long run. In the very short, long run. And again, the fourth item is also increasing the highway aid through the state for an increase in expenditures related to the asphalt and blacktop for the roads that you see here. Just the price of blacktop had gone up more so than what was budgeted.
Do we want to make a motion to budget amendments?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
That wedger's gonna work, Mike? Never.
We want our cap pavers so we can redo the wedge when we're doing developments. Instead of leaving the existing wedge and mashing into it, we're gonna take the wedge out.
Get their quality.
It'll be a better quality, it'll be a better seam.
Sweet.
Good job, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, the third category is personnel, and as we mentioned earlier, our current DCO, Josh Vinsek, has submitted his resignation effective September 30th. Mr. Brian Crow is available to begin work immediately, so we're going to have a month overlap so that there will be some time for the baton to be passed and for Brian to be trained by Josh. So if the board agrees, then Mr. Crow can be hired immediately. His rate will be $27.50 per hour.
And I know Brian for a long time. Dwayne knows him. He's a retired state trooper. He knows how to talk to people, handle things. It'd be a big,
And he's got about 4 dogs, 2 shepherds and...
right.
The second item under personnel is our town clerk, Sue Baldwin, is requesting to attend the New York State Town Clerk's quarterly meeting in Rochester. I don't know why I put Rochester, NYC. That should just be Rochester, New York. Sorry about that. The meeting is for September 10th through 12th, and it requires board approval because it's for overnight travel. And then the last item is that John King, who is the supervisor for maintenance over at the park, is requesting to be established as the department head for park maintenance.
Explains the pictures, the ending of the pictures.
Right.
I thought he was already, but...
That's what I thought he was already there.
Yeah.
I thought we did that last year.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to accept all 3, A, B, and C.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you. And so the last item is that I am requesting to use a portion of our unassigned fund balance to start planning for increases in healthcare related expenditures for our retirees. So the town pays a good portion of retiree health insurance. And as our retiree population begins to swell, the town will, of course, be covering a higher expenditure for those retirees. So this is not a reserve account. This is different. This is just an assignment which would be created with board approval, and board approval would also be able to undo that assignment. Should we decide down the road that we want to decrease the amount that we're setting aside for retiree health insurance? So it's, like I said, it's a little bit less formal than a reserve account, but it at least uses some portion of our unencumbered fund balance to recognize the fact that our expenses are going to be higher for retiree health care.
How is health care insurance handled for employees who are under the age of 65 versus those who are qualified for Medicare?
Perfect question. So we have a couple of those. We have people who are less than 65 who have retired, who are eligible to maintain their health insurance. And so what happens there is that those retirees are able to continue to receive that health insurance and participate with the same percentage, paying the same percentage that they were as active, which is a small percent. So if, let's say you have a spouse and the retiree, the rate is like 17.2%. So it's very reasonable, and the rest of that expenditure is borne by the town. So it still continues to be a town expense for the most part for that population of people, but it's a small, there's only two people in that category right now. So, and then once they age into Medicare, again, those same percentages will apply to the cost of Medicare insurance through Humana.
Okay. So, so the town, for retirees, the town has a supplemental plan to
Yes.
Medicare.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That I assume is substantially lower than the insurance cost prior
Yes.
to Medicare.
Definitely.
Based on years of service too, I believe.
Yes, so
It has to hit
you
at
have to
20 years.
retire, right, you have to retire being eligible for health insurance, right?
Yep, okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to, whatever Maria needs.
Whatever she wants to do with that 100 grand.
Whatever you want to do with that 100 grand.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Before we adjourn, Mike, I just want to tell you, you've done a heck of a job since the first of the year. I know the last 2 months you've got a lot of headaches, and you've done a heck of a job. And I watched your hair getting grayer all the time.
Thank you.
So I had Maria put a little extra
kill
in
for
your budget, so when you need a toupee, which I think that's gonna happen, take care of it.
I'd kill for
The judge accused me of dyeing my hair yesterday. I'm like, are you crazy?
You're doing a great job, Mike. Somebody want to make a motion?
So moved. Adjourn.
Second? Third in favor?
Aye.